Hello and welcome to Tree Talk. This is our April edition of Tree Talk, and we're going to talk a little bit about buds and blooms, and then we're going to finish up with some of the resources that are available in the programming that's coming up virtually during this COVID-19 crisis. All right, so again, this is Dave Apsley with Ohio State University Extension. I've got Jamie Dahl on the line as well with Central State University Extension. And Jamie will be covering the blooms part, the flowers, and I'm going to spend a little time on some of the trees and what's happening in the woods as we speak. So here's my first picture, and I've got a series of photos for each of these pictures, and so I'm trying to get a little interaction. Actually posted this one on Instagram the other day, asking folks if they know what it is. It's in full bloom right now. It's actually on its way out. And just a few more hints. Here's the bark of this tree, and it was probably about 6 inches around, so quite a bit bigger than a softball. You can see if you look up this tree and the trunk how crooked it is. It's a survivor. It's tried to find the light and work its way into that canopy over time. And if you see here where my arrow is, that's that narrow winding tree that's found its way up to a little sunlight under the shade of this monstrous yellow poplar that's probably about a 30-inch diameter tree. But because an ash tree died over in this part of the woods, it was actually able to get some light, and you can see those blooms are flowering out there now. A lot of people first guess is flowering dogwood, but this tree is much taller than any flowering dogwood I've ever seen. It's a tall, skinny, narrow tree that made it up in the canopy, and that's called a serviceberry. Downy serviceberry is probably the most common one here in Southeast Ohio. Not a real abundant one, but this time of year when you drive through the hills in the native woodlands, not necessarily right on the edges because a lot of that's non-native stuff, but in native woodlands, serviceberry is a pretty common one that you're going to see. Here's a shot, just the landscape, kind of similar to the background I've got, and you see a few trees that are starting to pop with a little color. Got some pines down here, and the bright yellow is probably tulip poplar, but these got a little reddish tint. And as we zoom in a little closer, you might see some hints. Now we ought to be seeing some hints that help people at least get it down to the genus or the group of trees. See the helicopter fruits that are popped? Our soft maples get these fruits this time of year. And this is red maple. There's a little bit closer shot of it. And again, red maple again. Another one that's pretty common, kind of a purplish bloom on the edges in the understory in the woods. As we zoom in a little bit closer, that one is not quite in full bloom here in Jackson, Ohio, but that's our eastern redbud. Took this out the window this morning. Starting to get a little yellow. The other clue, it's got some green twigs here. It's a plant that has green twigs year-round. As we zoom in, there are these bright little yellow flowers. That's our sassafras. It's getting ready to pop and flower. But these little balls up in the trees, about the size of a marble. And as we zoom in a little bit, you'll see this little velvety bud on the end and the round buds that are starting to swell. That's our pawpaw that's going to, hopefully, if we don't get too much of a late frost, I hear this morning, when I looked at the weather, that we might get a frost in the next couple mornings. So hopefully that won't knock the pawpaws out. But these flowers are very interesting. Will turn a dark blood red with a kind of a yellow insert, and they're actually pollinated by flies. Really unique plant. And then, of course, folks that are from Southeast Ohio realize the importance of pawpaw and how it can be used as a crop and a fruit that we can eat. Actually, I think there's some folks at the Ryan, I believe at the South Centers, doing some work with pawpaw. So that's the pawpaw and the fruit. Another one, I couldn't get a really good overall tree shot because of the light conditions, but this one I always like to tell the joke of, how do you tell a tree or a dogwood tree, and it's by its bark. And if you look at the dogwood bark, it's got this characteristic real blotchy small plates. As we zoom in, those flowers are starting to break, and they're at different stages of development depending on where you are in the state, and even on my property, depending on if it's in the sun or in a shaded location or whatever. But that flower, actually the flowers, the inner part, these are what we call leafy bracts, the white things that'll expand into the dogwood. I took this shot yesterday morning after a heavy rain, and you can see they're starting. Some of them are getting pretty far along. This one was taken this morning. So that's our flowering dogwood, real common edge species that we're going to see here in Southeast Ohio. And then finally, my last tree that I want to spend a little bit of time on is this one. The buds are really swelling. I've actually got 3 species of this tree in my woods, different types, and I'll tell you a little bit more without giving it away here. But big buds, you can see the buds are paired or opposite from one another. So that narrows it down. I got Dwayne on the screen if he remembers the Mad Buck that we talked about. The M stands for maple, the A stands for ash, the D is dogwood, and then the buck is Buckeye. So Mad Buck, this is actually our Ohio Buckeye. I've got 2 other Buckeyes planted on the property. One is a native yellow Buckeye, which is pretty common here in the southeastern part of the state. And then I've got red Buckeye, or it's a Aesculus pallida, and it is a red Buckeye it's native to the south of here. And it's got red spiked fruits on it. So I'm really anxious to see the red Buckeye when it gets ready to flower here shortly. So those are my trees, just an update. We've got some trees that are completely breaking bud and the foliage is showing, like the Buckeye here. Other trees, as I look out my window and see the wind blowing the trees around, like the oaks, haven't even started to break bud. So some trees are more driven by the temperature and the conditions we're in. Others are driven more by the light, the day length, or what we call the photo period. So some things won't leaf out till much later, things like oak. And you'll find out that that's a strategy. By leafing out later, it gives some plants an advantage, and then they're not as exposed to late frost and such. So that's just my overview of what's happening with some of the trees in the woods. Once a week or so, we'll post different activities here. So again, visit Southeast Ohio Woods. It's u.osu.edu/Southeast Ohio Woods. And with that, I'm going to switch my screen share to one last slide just to give you our my contact information. I apologize. I thought I had Jamie's on here too. But if you need to get a hold of either me or Jamie, we've got that available for you as well. So don't hesitate. We're working. We do work for OSU Extension. We're working regularly. And we can be reached by email or by phone. Don't hesitate to call. We're on Zoom a lot, so we may not be able to pick up right away, but we'll certainly do our best to get back with you and keep in touch. Enjoy your time out there in the woods. It's a great time. We don't have the commute time that we have normally, so should have some opportunities to go out and spend a little bit more time in the woods.